Hello, Ben. Thank you for giving us some of your time to talk about your chapter in the book. Ben, you're part of the OmniFuturists, and you've written a chapter for our book, Future Visions. I think that we should definitely start with you telling us all a little bit about yourself, please.
I am the I'm the eldest son of a fourth generation family business. I decided, I don't know if I want to put it that way. My brother asked me when we were young adults if he could take over the family business, and I was okay with that. Um, I had been pursuing music as a degree in college. After college, I was in the military. I had auditioned to be in the Navy band, but my drum set chops weren't good enough. But my recruiter found me a position as a journalist, and I really got into broadcast journalism. I think that's kind of how I even ended up interacting with OmniFuturists was because of like my copy editing background was a little bit what got me the interview into the Transhumanist Party. It was while I was in the military when I had about a year left to go that I was like, what's after this? And I had the thought that maybe we could suspend a head on artificial technology and theoretically keep on living. So that's kind of what made me go into health school. Afterwards, I was first pursuing pre-med, and I was thinking, well, if I'm a surgeon, I could learn how to hook up the head to an otherwise artificial machine. But then went into pre-physician assistant studies. Didn't make physician assistant school the first couple tries I had, but went instead with public health realm. A little more talking about like administrative roles within healthcare systems, working for a Department of Health and Human Services, that kind of thing. Um, and then got that, did a little travel. Finally ended up coming back to Madison in 2015. Have been here ever since. I currently work in drug quality control. Been doing that the last 2.5 years, and I feel like it's a pretty good spot for me to be living my life mission of keeping on living and of helping products and therapies get to market that help people keep on living.
That's excellent. Thank you. And maybe also you could tell us a little bit about the topics that you covered in your chapter.
So I am the director of longevity outreach for the US Transhumanist Party. Uh, I'm kind of trying to remember how I got into the OmniFuturists. I think we were interacting about various books that were interesting, and I was happy to start interacting more. And then with my proofreading, copy editing background, I did help with the first Future Visions that came out last year. In that way, AI is not my area. I very much look to the rest of the people in this community to help me know what I need to know about it. I kind of look at the headlines, but I feel like if I'm going to dig into anything, I need to dig into the longevity science stuff more. And even that, I'm not digging in as much as I used to. I feel like it's more my job to make sure that people are learning about longevity science than to actually be the expert in longevity science. But I also think that I gotta get practice writing. And when OmniFuturists and you offered me this chance to write a chapter for this year, I thought, well, it's as good a chance as any. My first thought of how to write this chapter was going to be to do it all in one fell swoop. I think I tried that on a Sunday and maybe another Sunday, and it's like, oh, this is just isn't happening. But then I thought, I know how to interview people, and I know how to get the quotes that they have given me and tie them one to the next to the next to the next. And that's how you write a story. That's how you. I mean, I first learned the technique in broadcast journalism through doing TV stories, but then same principle for newspaper stories. Just use the quotes let them be your scaffolding. And through doing that for the chapter in this year's book, and through allowing myself just to riff a little bit as I sometimes do in all of my journaling background that I have, uh, managed to get the 6,000 words that we were going for.
Yeah, I want to say that I think that yours was probably the easiest to read, very fluid, very liquid. I really liked it. And the further point is that I think that one common thread in all of our futurist interests in transhumanism and other things is super longevity. That seems to be one topic where we all seem to find common cause. But
Mhm.
I've got a quick series of questions that I'm curious about it, other
Sure.
than what you wrote. So the first one is, do you think that the economic singularity is likely to occur in the next 10 years? If not, when, if ever? And you can say pass if you wish, because you already said, AI is not necessarily my thing, but it's good
Mhm.
background.
So it was 2 weeks ago now that DeepSeek was announced to the world, if I'm remembering timing correctly. 2 weeks ago tomorrow,
Something like
and
that, yeah.
then it was in yesterday's Washington Post headline that Elon Musk's real motivations were released about automating the whole workforce. So I don't know. It's sure knocking on the door loud. Um, we'll see what happens. I mean, I don't know the degree that I mean, there is some degree that Elon Musk is getting pushback. I don't know how sharp those teeth are on that pushback that he's receiving. I guess I kind of feel like our job is to, while we might be more concerned about some aspects of this administration and how it is doing things so far, to also help people see, um, you've been complaining about this job that you've had for the last 30 years. You sure you want to keep doing it? Let's just automate it. I mean, now granted, we need to come together to make sure that we don't have people starving because everybody's out of work and everybody's on the streets. So I would say we could be close. Um, I a little bit thought of like reaching out to my interviewees after the thing from Elon Musk in the Washington Post yesterday, but I was like, well, they'll find out in their various ways. I feel like people are it's hard to not kind of hear what's going on these days in the news unless you are actively avoiding it. So I look forward to conversations with various people that know about me writing this chapter, or other people just that I talk about with these topics of, we'll see how fast do you think our jobs can be automated, and how do we ensure this is a good thing, if and when it happens.
I formed the OmniFuturists in 2022, and I think we just generally thought we had about 10 years to plan how to react to it. And you're talking about the crux of the problem, meaning, sure, almost all of us really would prefer to not have to work. The question is then, how do you live? And that's the part that hasn't been even worked on seriously. And that's the critical problem because, as you're pointing out, it's not going to take 10 more years at the rate they're going. And there is no plan. So that's the kind of the focus of the economic singularity for the omnifuturists is not so much is it coming or exactly when it's coming. It's the question of how do we survive it? So the next question might be, how do you think you would define the onset of the economic singularity? What does that mean to you?
I might defer to Mike. You have that equation when there starts to be mass unemployment comparable to like the Great Depression. If we have, is that 30% or something that we can attribute to automation taking the jobs? It's a little concerning about, boy, someone needs to check me on my history, but when people started losing their jobs in the late 20s, early 30s, and then because they didn't have money to spend, then that was a vicious cycle of more unemployment because not as much money to go around. So when if this starts to happen, how the government can keep money flowing through the system. And maybe that's kind of what happened right as COVID was hitting the scene, and there's like just keep money in people's pockets. That's how we're gonna get through this right now. And yes, with some inflation concerns at that same time. But for this being a long-term, um, um, not just like the pandemic hit and then we figured it out, but like there's like we are able to automate all the work that there is. I don't know, and I don't know if we in the OmniFuturists have quite reached an understanding of how there could be more work or where there would be more work when the work that we are accustomed to knowing about is starting to get automated. Please ask your question one more time, just in case I have one more thought
Sure.
that would
So
fit.
I asked, how would you define the onset of the economic singularity?
Yeah, we, I mean, with an announcement like in the Post, I'm curious how what the response is and how that starts to show up in the news cycles more. And I think as people start to recognize its imminence, I mean, that itself is, hmm, if that's what people are thinking is coming, that's kind of onset in its own way. So
Yeah, so I'm going to just respond to a couple of the things that you pointed out. In the Great
please.
Depression, unemployment reached about 25%. And so I've been using that as kind of like an example to people of, for about 10 years, the Great Depression dragged on, and that was very high levels of unemployment. And I don't want to react every time it goes from an unemployment of 4% to 5%. So what I selected as relatively arbitrary but quite unusual levels was unemployment rate of 10%, and also look at the labor participation rate. Among
Right.
men, it's about 68%. It's declined about 18% over the last 70 years, so very
Mhm.
slowly. If it were to decline another 18% from 68 down to 50, so only half of the men of working age, let's say 25 to 55, if only half of them still had a job, that would be catastrophic.
Mm.
So those were my indicator levels. But I think you're talking about some of the things that would be indicators that it has come. You've got
Mhm.
massive millions of people losing their job to automation. One of the things that we look at that's different than, say, usually when we talk about this, someone will say, well, when the tractors came, the horses didn't have a job. When we went off the farm, we started working in the factory. There's going to be something to do, Mike. And here's the difference that everyone seems to overlook. The tractor didn't have to think. The
Mhm.
factory assembly line didn't have any capability of thinking. the 1970s when the robot arms in Detroit started welding together cars. They couldn't think. They just did a very narrow set of jobs. And that's what's changing is if you have something like generative AI or agentic AI where the software can do some very simple planning and decision making. And now you mentioned Tesla. They've got some bots. The Chinese have some humanoid robots. If you were to marry that sort of thinking capability, a very basic reasoning capability with a dexterous, mobile, ambulating robot, that's a human. And some of the Chinese bots are
Hmm.
claiming that they're like $12,000. Okay, I'm
Hmm.
sorry, there's no human that's going to be able to compete with a robot that only costs $12,000 that doesn't have sick leave or vacation or benefits. And, so anyway, that's the crux of the problem. So
Hmm.
the next question after that, my friend, is how do you think that humanity should deal with the economic singularity?
I didn't know that this would be my conclusion when I started writing the chapter, but maybe with 1,000 words to go or thereabouts, it was at that point at least becoming pretty clear to me that it's not a revolutionary new idea. It's just we as humans need to come together to help work through this time. I think with the thought that if we get through this time and if we do our best to engineer this next phase in human evolution the right way, it could be really good for all of us involved. If it goes sideways or negative on us, then kind of this whole experiment that has been civilization is for naught. So a little bit like we have to work through this together to ensure that not only has everything up until now been worth it, but the prospect of what could be with figuring out how to use this technology appropriately is um, um, I don't want to say like nothing better, and we don't want to quite. It's not like it'll be utopia. There will still be problems to resolve. I do like the term. Can't remember who coined it, but protopia about just constantly working to make things slightly better. Um, it's just that right now we have a lot of change coming at us very quickly, and so we do really have to all be participating as best we can to help this situation become the right one for our next direction as a civilization.
Yeah, it's very good how you were talking through this, and I tend to simplify it just for discussion purposes of, there's two main paths. One is um, cyberpunk and one is solar punk. Okay. And so the
Mhm.
cyberpunk is Blade Runner, and the ultra wealthy keep all of the profits from all the bots. All the concentration of wealth goes right up to the top like it normally does. And the rest of us are barely surviving. And the other version is kind of a solar punk or Star Trek economy where that wealth that's generated by agentic AI and by cognitive automation is then redistributed so that
Mhm.
everybody on the entire planet is supported. And so I'm hoping, and this actually goes into the next question, which is, that solar punk version is advocated a lot by our friend David Wood, that there might be a path to superabundance. So the next question actually is, do you think that we will ever achieve superabundance?
Yes, I am optimistic that this is how things if we make it through this window of all sorts of change, it's almost like how could this not be? Ugh, no. There are all these dystopian things about like you're gonna have just the wealth concentrate all to the top. Um, maybe I'll go go this way. Um, I do think all of us deep down are good people. Sometimes you got to dig more, but I think uh, very deep down we're all good people. And I will make another exception for like sociopaths that just like the chemicals within them just aren't right. But then it's like, well, you can't hold them to blame for that. But I feel like all of us are good people, more or less deep down. Also, and this is more optimism. I think that as we if we are willing to discuss things with people with differing views in a friendly manner, ultimately the truth is what will settle out. I think right now we're struggling with that, which is anything I could say would be less dramatic than how terrible it really is for us right now that there is such division amongst us about just some beliefs that just on the surface just don't fit. I was thinking about this a couple days ago with a friend of mine that he and we are deep down. I know that we believe very, very, very similar things, but like being around him can be challenging sometimes, but it's just like because of how we manifest a similar belief structure, but on the surface. And I think that kind of goes for behaviors as well as for like if you ultimately decide one thing versus another on an issue. Um, I know we kind of we it's sad that there are wedge issues out there and that it kind of makes it that you gotta I don't like that we have to decide either or sometimes. I know there's like this whole like you're at a negotiation table and you start really strong in your belief and then the other party's going to counter and you eventually come to something you can agree upon. It a little bit reminds me of that with our certain positions on issues that if we could kind of compromise on both sides, we could find a path that's like, well, that side's not going to be, no one's going to be, I can't say no one's going to be 100% happy. The people on both sides are going to be unhappy about it, but in the middle, it's like, well, this is the best we could do about it. So I do maintain an optimism that if we can start working together and discussing through our issues, if we all can recognize each other as people with good intentions deep down, I feel like superabundance um, is the what makes sense is what would be the result of us all working together to make it to this next stage of our civilization.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you that it is certainly possible that we get to superabundance. I think my concern is as you watch the chaos in Washington, D.C., there might be a neo-reactionary thread to this that, as you go to more like illiberal democracies, you don't always get a very fair economic situation for everyone in the population. You and I are in America, and so we're tending to focus on how might America deal with this. I have hope that other countries around the world might have a stronger social safety net and a more redistributive outlook and not allow a couple guys to have trillions of dollars and hundreds of millions starve to death.
Right.
I'm not so certain America is going to be able to do that until disaster has already wrought its disaster, the deaths and destruction. So,
Mm,
it's
mm,
that's why I tend to focus on the idea that the economic singularity might be a transition period, a very, very painful transition period, until through that pain we learn we actually do have to share. I mean, something we're taught in kindergarten is lost when you start working for a lot of people. But the next
mhm.
question, my friend, is Are you concerned at all about the arrival of artificial superintelligence? Not just the kind we're talking, you and I are talking about now, that somebody who can stack boxes at a warehouse, for example. We're talking about things, superintelligence being far smarter than all human intelligence combined. Does that concern
Yeah.
you?
I hope that we can be looked at by something. We as humanity can be looked at by something that is artificial superintelligence, and it see that we are good to keep existing, that we would be good for sharing with other planets. I think I've kind of had this thought about like if there are ETs out there, and if they're looking at our planet and they're like, these guys are terrible. We're not going to let them into our universal community just yet. Um, if that's the case, maybe they're like, well, they're not hurting anything yet, so we can let them keep existing. They're not a virus that should just be stomped out right now. Um, um, isn't it from Star Trek that they also say like once they've learned light speed or something, then that's when they're taken into the universal community. I forget how they had this figured. Anyway, so um, I hope that we as humanity can start proving ourselves to um, ourselves enough, and then to anything else that might come along, that yes, we are worthy for this universe, and we are worthy for existence. Um, I think that a um, a sufficiently sensitive artificial superintelligence would recognize the beauty that is within us. Um, I just kind of got to hope that we have programmed these precursors to that artificial superintelligence in a way that it can recognize the good in us and help us to be better to each other and for the universe as a whole.
I love that perspective. Thank you. The final question for you, my friend, is, and I think I know the answer from other things you've discussed. What other topic is first and foremost on your mind? For example, space travel and colonization, or super longevity, perhaps, or crypto, or geopolitics, or quantum mechanics and quantum computers, et cetera. I mean, is there, besides, the economic singularity and that kind of like how do we survive type of thing, is there something else that's first and foremost in your interest levels?
I think like the clearly the super longevity piece. I did join the Transhumanist Party without thinking that I ever needed to leave planet Earth. We do have the whole, well, if there's an asteroid coming our way, it'd be good to have a backup plan or something. But um, yeah, uh, I do not feel like like there's any point to the universe. So I do not feel like there's any point to the universe, a universe in which everything that is conscious and sentient dies eventually. Like there is no carried forward memory of anything. It's like in the movie The Hangover, like they had a crazy night, but they were on roofies, so they don't remember any of what they did. So any of those experiences were just kind of wasted. I feel like it's the same thing in a universe where everything dies, and on our planet now, where everything does indeed die, unless you want to say like um, bacteria that replicate and split, and then that any of them that are here now are from the original and are inherently the original bacteria. But I feel like us keeping on living is what can give life meaning. If I could keep living this very life that I am right now and just keep living it, nothing got any more modern. I guess theoretically, I'd be okay with that. I'd want to keep experiencing more of the world. But um, to me, that the possibility of keeping on living gives my existence meaning, and I would think everybody's existence meaning. Um, there is this thought of like the terror management theory that the fact that we all die is what makes humans do all that they do, because they have this lingering thought in their head that at some point this is all gone. So I'm curious how humans will evolve, and once, fingers crossed, once we have this curing aging thing figured out, I'm optimistic for our future. Um, uh, I guess I feel like if we don't ever figure out this aging piece, there might not be a point to the universe and living anyway.
Very good. Thank you for your time. Everybody, you've got to read Ben's chapter. Now, our book, I think I've got this. Yeah, okay. This book is last year's book. It's already on Amazon. This book is the new one that's going to come out. It should be out by the time this video shows, but Ben's got an excellent chapter in Future Visions. It'll be available very soon. Ben, thank you so much for your time, your effort, your energy on all of these very important topics. Thank you for your time today, my friend.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Me, futurists.